Awesome. We're live on YouTube.
Excellent.
Officially. Awesome. Very exciting. Then I have my intro ready. Great. Cool. Awesome. Welcome, guys. This is Dr. Nancy Lee. You are in our live recording of the Product Insider. So let me get started with today's show and also welcome our guest, Rob Leathern. How are you guys doing? Awesome.
Hi.
Cool. Hi, Rob. Great. So, and now quick introduction regarding Product Insider, and I'm your host, Dr. Nancy Lee. So let's get started. Hey, this is Dr. Nancy Lee. I'm passionate about all things product, career growth, and nonprofit. I'm on a mission to help people record amazing product that impact millions of people's lives while getting the work-life balance they deserve. Welcome to Product Insider. Shy away from the real talk? No way. We're covering everything from imposter syndrome, people management, and barriers facing the product leaders of tomorrow. We're joined by fan-level product leaders to get a rundown on the hottest right now. And I'm your host, Dr. Nancy Lee. Moved to the US with $800 in my pocket and became a director of product in 4 years. Now I run Product Manager Accelerator, a course that makes product management career available to everybody. Are you ready? Welcome to Product Insider. Okay, so very excited to have our guest today, Robert Leathern. And actually, it's such an honor to bring Rob on our show because Rob has a very amazing journey. He currently is a VP of product at Google and also product leader at Meta. Also started 2 successful products in the past. And Rob, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Doing really well. I've been enjoying some time, some vacation recently, and just really excited to share some thoughts with you and the audience here.
Awesome. So Rob, let me ask you a quick question. Where are you based right now?
I'm in Austin, Texas, so
This
Bay Area for quite a while, and then actually moved to Boulder and moved back to the Bay Area, then moved to Austin at the end of 2019. So I've been here for a few years now.
This is awesome. You actually moved before the booming of pandemic.
Just before, yes, and was traveling back and forth to the Bay Area and had a desk in at Facebook at the time. Had a desk in Menlo Park, had a desk in Austin. I got all my stuff back from Austin, by the way. When I left the company, I'm still waiting for my stuff from Menlo Park, funnily.
I see. Awesome. Cool. So Rob, so let's do this. Given you had such amazing journey in different companies and also move across different places and making your own personal and career choice, do you want to give us a quick overview of your background?
Sure. Yeah. Just going backwards. I've been in big tech companies the last 6 years. The last 2 years with Google, working in the central privacy and security team. And then before that, I ran the product team for a group at Facebook, now Meta, called Business Integrity. So it was protecting the commercial products. Most of that was ads, but we made sure that bad ads didn't get through. We followed up and sued bad actors. We also built a bunch of transparency tools for political ads and all ads and so on, and also some ads privacy related work. And so that was, those are kind of my first big tech company roles the last 6 years. And then before that, started 2 different companies. One was actually an ad blocking company. We sold the technology before I joined Facebook. And then before that, built one of the largest ads API partners to companies like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. We started in display advertising, but then we pivoted to social media ads. We sold that business in 2013. I'd worked at a few different places. I worked at LinkedIn for a little while, which was interesting. In the very early days when we had like 40 people at the company.
Wow.
And like you, I also grew up and moved to the U.S. Grew up overseas and moved to the U.S. Went to college in the U.S., etc. So, yeah, it's been a journey, but very very glad to be here.
Awesome. Another immigrant story. So let me ask you, Rob, where are you original from?
I grew up in South Africa. Yeah, my family, a lot of my family's still there. So going back, this summer to go see, well, summer here, winter there, go see some folks. But yeah, I get every year and a half, 2 years to go see people over there. But that's where I grew up.
Wow, this is beautiful. It's always a place I want to visit. Actually, I have a student currently is in Nigeria and another in Kenya. It's like very global. It's amazing. Great to see lots of people just creating amazing career and cross cultures, cross companies as well, which lead into our today's main topic regarding building trust in large and small and different sizes of organizations, because we believe that the culture differences and also even within the large organization, the different people from very different perspective, the trust is actually very important for product managers to build. And actually, I look up online, actually 55% of the business owners feel like having trust is one of the most important core value of the success of their company. And it's crazy. And also from product management's perspective, we are also building trust among different stakeholders. And therefore, today I want to hear from your perspective regarding, you have been working in like 40 people LinkedIn team when they started, and also all the way to manage your own large organization in Google and Meta as a VP of product. Can you share with us regarding why trust is so important in all sizes of companies from product perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the product manager has a pretty unique role, and it's kind of like, there's lots of different takes on how to be a good product manager and what it actually means. But often you're kind of, someone on my team once described it as you're the glue that's holding a lot of things together. And so, glue is something that you really have to trust, or maybe it's zip ties or something else. But it's something that kind of needs to bind things together. And in itself, people need to trust that you can help facilitate things. I think also, there's a tendency sometimes, I think there's a lot of this old notion that the product manager is the CEO of the product, like that. And I think that's like not really the case. And we can talk more about why I don't think that's the case. But I think there's also, a lot of misperception about the role of product management. I think there's, a lot of people who actually, I actually used to see this when people would want to transfer to become a product manager from another discipline. Often their understanding of what a PM does was different than the reality. And I think once they learned the reality, some of them were like, no, I actually don't want to do that job. I don't want to be in meetings all day. So I think trust is really important because, like a lot of other things as well, the product manager is facilitating a lot of things. And so to be a good facilitator, I think you need to be someone that is trustworthy and someone that can, help bring people together.
Awesome. So Rob, I do want to dive deeper a little bit regarding the CEO product. You think you have a different opinion regarding the CEO product. So what's in reality what product manager is doing? If we are not the CEO, are we the COO or CMO? So tell us more.
The COO, and I've had some of these jobs, but no, I think I think of one of the things I think of a product manager is doing is being responsive. And this again, these are not my words, but learning from others originally. So a product manager is responsible for facilitating and is responsible for high quality of decisions that are made about the product, right? So, I think it's in some cases, depending on the size of the team and the situation, you're making some decisions, or the way in which you're framing already is directing things a certain way. But I think often it's the case that there are other people who have to weigh in, have to help make decisions, and you're essentially a facilitator to help make decisions. So I see in some ways, a good CEO, I think often is a facilitator. But the difference with a CEO, I think, having been one, is at the end of the day, when someone has to make a decision, and no one else has made the decision, you're making the decision. The other thing that happens is if, your AWS instances go down at 2 a.m. in the morning, you and maybe the CTO are the ones, getting on the phone, et cetera. Like you're the last line of whatever. I think the PM sometimes has that role, but really a lot more. It's like helping within the structure of whatever that organization, facilitating decision making and making sure those decisions are of high quality.
Love it. So when you emphasize on the facilitating part, I think that lead to the challenges we're talking about regarding building trust. Can you tell us why it's so challenging and crucial? We talk about crucial is important. Why it's so hard to actually building trust and facilitate and bring everyone on the same page as a product manager?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people are coming from different perspectives and different history with PMs. I think it was Lenny Rachiski recently was saying something about, some people have experiences of PMs that aren't good PMs. And so, you may have everyone's coming from a different background, different perspective. Some people have been in organizations where there is no PM function. So, you have to meet people where they're at. The other thing I've also seen is, for example, with a lot of, in smaller organizations, you have engineering managers who are taking on that role of essentially some of the things that a PM would do, and there hasn't been a PM function. You're creating one. And then, some of those things are things that an engineering manager wants to continue to do or they enjoy doing. So you also, depending on where your organization is, you're actually like growing into certain things and you're defining roles and creating clarity. And so, you need to get to know and spend time on the relationships in order to be able to get the creation of that clarity, in order to be able to also create swim lanes for people so they're not running into each other. One of the things I find actually very useful in this is also to, create leadership groups where it's multiple different functions that are sitting at the same table. So, because it can sometimes feel like PM is telling other functions what to do. And in some cases, it's kind of true, but the reality is that it's much better if it's a collaborative atmosphere and people are sitting at the same table, they're bringing different perspectives, and they're kind of working together in that way.
This is awesome. So Rob, can you give up something juicy, which is at Google or Meta, you can pick any of the large companies, from their perspective, what's in real life the challenges you guys facing? You sound like real life example. You can remove anything confidential. We just want to see from like leading tech perspective, right? Because I would imagine there's so many different teams in Google and it sounds easy to bring people on the same table, but when you actually execute it, you will face real life challenges. Can you give us some insider secret regarding like using Google or Meta as an example? What does it look like to work with others? Any kind of pushback you had when you implement the building trust strategies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think building trust, it's not just within the folk or problem directly. It's also when in any of these companies, when you're trying to solve a problem, in some cases you create other problems or you learn that there's other confounding issues. So I spent a lot of time working in the integrity or trust and safety space at Meta specifically. And so there's always these concerns where you're like, okay, we're going to implement this policy change that's meant to stop this particular thing what we think is bad. But obviously the detection of things is not perfect. These concentric circles of, other folks who are impacted. So what ends up happening is it's customers getting impacted, but it's also other teams getting impacted. So they may not be able to ship something. They may have to work they may have to work with partners to implement new things that again create like these other effects. So I think there's always these trade-offs that you have to help manage across different teams. So it's not just across functions working on your thing. That's one aspect of this kind of cross-functional leadership and value that you're helping to create. But it's also across different teams who are seeing different sides of the same thing. One of the things we like to do, I know, for example, at Meta, one of the things we would try to do is gain alignment, for example, through sharing metrics. So we'd say, okay, this team is going to ship this thing. And we want to set up some guardrails. So let's make sure that this particular metric that we agree on, it doesn't go outside of this range. If it does, then let's have a discussion, et cetera. So a lot of times those things were pretty, manual, hands-on. Like, okay, we're like looking at the data every day and we're having reviews and whatever, or every month we might have a review about it. But then, as you kind of instrument those things in your product, you can actually make it more automated. So it's just really like not really a problem until you get some notification. It's like, okay, this particular rate is dropping below this threshold. Let's, go and have a discussion about it. So I think, one thing is like different teams and different functions have different incentives. And so acknowledging that, coming up with things that cut across those and perhaps allow you to, metrics being one way of potentially doing that, turned out to be pretty useful because then also it takes some of that personal, adversarial nature of it away, because it says, look, we've agreed in advance on this metric. If the metric goes south, we'll talk about it. It's not really about, you say this or I say that.
Exactly. So no wonder. So like all the big tech companies, they're more towards, we are data-driven company. And even for people currently interviewing with Meta, or when they were interviewing with Meta, they ask lots of like parametrics questions. So basically you guys are using metrics to drive the alignment within different teams. Rob, I do have something real life challenge. Maybe you can help me out. Regarding building trust in the remote environment. Mm-hmm. I also have my team. My team is everywhere. Like UK have people working for you, like from UK working for me, like in Asia, in the US, all over the world. We frequently find out those kind of trust, it's harder when it's in a remote environment. When we are in person, it's easy. Let's have some coffee. And I think it's more easier to build that human dynamic. Nowadays, it's remote. Mm-hmm. Do you have specific strategies to build trust and alignment in a remote environment in both like larger companies and small companies?
Yeah, so many years ago, more than a decade ago, we had this thing where we had so my company was like 40 people, and we had a bunch of people who were remote in Chicago and New York and other places. And we were mainly in the Bay Area. What I did is I said, okay, for this all hands, we're all going to dial in from our computers. This was way before COVID, and everyone was used to Zoom and things like that. And like people looked at me like I was really crazy, because I was like, I want everyone to be on an equal footing to dial into the discussion. And so because the dynamics will be different. So we did that one time. It was like people were like, okay, this is kind of weird. But I do think you need to kind of think about ways in which to put people on an equal footing in these remote settings. A couple things I've done with various teams is like move things around, or have like again, depending where your teams are, if they're in Europe and teams in Europe and Asia, like it's pretty challenging to get something that works for everyone. So alternating different times for things, recording meetings, things like that, so people can catch up on their own schedule. Those are all like useful things, sometimes not obvious, but useful things for remote work. I think that the next layer is like also, again, for bigger companies, if you're setting up teams, having something that a team can own more fully if they're in a remote location is useful. So that way they don't have, there isn't like high coordination costs and, very expensive kind of cross time zone bandwidth stuff.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean have people like high cross footing? What can you elaborate more?
So like as an example, if let's say that I have a product and I have a team in London and I have a team in area, and they have to talk about different specs like several times a day. Like there's only so much of a window where that's easy. However, if it's something where they for like 2 weeks and do a sprint and then come back, and then they don't have to like align and chat necessarily every single day. Like I think they can more fully own a particular feature or something like that. That's helpful. But to your point, I don't think there's really any way to get around. You just have to meet people in person from time to time. So, very targeted summits where you're something for a few days can be very useful. There is a downside of some of this stuff, which is like I've also instances where people aren't super sensitive. You're like, again, like also it's not just about in your area. Like if say you're coordinating with people in Europe and they tend to take vacation, at a certain time of the year.
Lots of vacations, yeah.
Yeah, but you have to just be sensitive to those things, because you're going to actually, in trying to make things better, you're going to make things worse, because people will say, oh, well, they're out of touch with the way things are done over here, etc. But I think even just more people being somewhat local to each other, or like within a few hours of each other. Maybe even in the same time zone and being remote. I mean, that's also, you still need to spend time getting to know each other in person in those settings too. So I think that's really important. And then just, always listening and creating opportunities for feedback, just understanding how people are feeling stuff. I think there's a lot that leaders, we create these opportunities to try to listen to feedback, but I think sometimes we can do even more than that to hear what people are saying and to meet them, like I said, meet them where they're at.
I love that. Hey, Rob, I do want to discuss in depth regarding the feedback systems. So currently, I know for like different companies, for example, Amazon has 360 feedback. I heard it's very stressful. You have people under you, like everybody needs to like you, or you're in danger. Or in other big tech companies, they have like annual performance review. So in my company, I implement a new strategy, which is we have monthly feedback session. It's not me giving other feedback. It's that, hey, everyone working in my company, can you give me feedback regarding how I manage you, how the company's growing, is any directions not aligned? Do you have any specific tips regarding how the feedback system can be implemented within your team and also cross-functionally? I personally believe that if we implement cross-functionally, you need to know how to say it better because their interests are not aligned for some cases. So can you shine some light on that?
Yeah, so I think the P0 on feedback, I think, is people need to see that you take action on feedback. So I think the quality of feedback goes up the more, in my opinion and my experience, the more people see that it actually makes a difference. And it's not just, oh, we heard your feedback about X, but like if X is never going to change, that's not great. So I think that's the main thing to start with. But you have to kind of ask the question lots of different ways. You can't also just assume, hey, I did this survey once or twice a year, and now this is the full set of feedback. There's always stuff that isn't said. I'm a big fan of, so I guess when I was at Facebook, you could give feedback in an attributed way or anonymously in like even performance or other cases. Again, this may have changed since then. This was a few years ago. I actually had an Eng partner who was like, I always give anonymous feedback because I don't want to feel like I'm holding back on feedback. And I took the opposite approach. I said, I always want it to be attributed because I don't ever want it to be the case that you hear about something in anonymous feedback or secondhand or something that I haven't said to you directly. So I try to give people feedback, again, if this is more performance oriented, directly, and then also write it, have it be written down. I think it's very this is a very difficult area, right? So there's no ultimately right or wrong answer here, but I do think that I prefer it when people put stuff in writing. They provide written feedback. I'm okay with anonymous feedback as well. I think there's some folks who just feel more comfortable doing that. I know some companies don't like anonymous feedback for various reasons. I generally think you have to facilitate mechanisms for this. People are going to talk and going to say stuff regardless. And so I think you just need to give them ways to do it in such a way that you're at least aware of these things. But again, I come back to what I said before, is like you need to figure out how you can make the experience for people better. And I think ultimately a lot of these companies, as knowledge workers, your employees and your team is your biggest asset, and you really have to figure out how to make them, happier, more efficient. And again, to the thing you said earlier at the top, which was, give them the ability to have balance in their lives so that they actually are excited to do the work that they're working on.
Exactly. So specifically, how would you filter the feedback that's not constructive? For example, in our last episode, I talked to the Senior Director of Product Growth at Stash, and Maria. So Maria mentioned something very interesting. She said she's open to feedback, but sometimes the feedback is hard to implement, or she doesn't know how exactly to change it, because one of the feedback she received is that you're too straightforward, Maria. You say whatever you say to others' face. That's too straightforward. Or sometimes we'll be like, hey, Maria, your sentence structure too long. So she came from Latin America, so the way Spanish, the words construction is just longer than English. So she just felt like it's me speaking directly, it's my personality. How do I actually change who I am? So there's like balance out there. So what do you think? And regarding implementing those feedback, and some feedback may not be as constructed as you wish.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's not, right? So sometimes you just have to kind of take some of that into account. One other thing I found useful is like, sometimes you need help from folks to gather feedback about you or about things you could do better. So a great example was my first manager at Facebook. She gathered a bunch of feedback from my directs and skip levels, and like she was able to get some insights that I wouldn't have gotten if I tried to ask them directly. And then I was able to act on those things. And again, you're always going to hear sometimes things where it's like, oh, this, like you said, something non-constructive that you can't really address, or it's like, or something that you think is actually just part of, who you are. And so not all feedback needs to be acted on. I think that's the other thing to take into account is like, sometimes people are upset or, they have had certain experiences or so on. You need to kind of take everything with, and sometimes it's really good to like bounce the feedback off of other people. So find a peer, have a mentor, be like, look, I heard this thing. I feel like this is valid. I feel like this, I'm not so sure about this. What do you think? And then also sometimes playing the feedback back to people, other people, gives them permission to give you the feedback as well. So you'll learn some new things. Feedback is something you use as a tool, and you kind of then also, like anything, I think it's content that you can use in different ways. And again, obviously not necessarily like saying, hey, John said this thing about me, because maybe it's inappropriate to say who said it. But I said, you could go back to someone and say, I heard this thing from a couple people on my team. How do you think I could address this? What have you done? Have you seen examples, especially if it's a mentor or someone you trust, who's going to be very, open and frank with you? I think that's also great. You can use the feedback in a few different ways.
Yeah, exactly. I love this. Actually, I have a failure story myself. I'm open to share because of Product Insider. A failure story regarding feedback. When I started hiring people for my company, and there was a time, one of my best hire in my company, and one day, so I think within 2 weeks in the company, I really like her, and she sent me a message saying that, Nancy, you gave me too much work. If you do not fix this and this, I'm going to quit. I was like, I just onboard you 2 weeks ago. You're my best hire. I interviewed rigorously to find you. Now it's threatened to quit within 2 weeks. She was like, I don't even need the money, Nancy. The 2 weeks don't even need to give me money, but you had to fix the problem for me to stay. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm glad people have a boss to stand up to me, to their boss, saying that I don't even need your money, but I want you to fix the problem. And that was so legit. Her feedback was so legit. It was like, oh, which is true. So basically, it's more like resource allocation within the company. And based on her feedback, I immediately hired 2 other people to grow the team, to build hierarchy, help each other out, and now so that everyone can reduce stress. And I do believe that those kind of feedback are very critical. One last question to you, Rob, regarding feedback. How often, the frequency? You mentioned earlier that some companies do it like annually or quarterly, whatever. What do you think is the best way to open the door and in terms of the frequency to receive feedback? How often you do that?
Yeah, I think it depends like what situation you are. To the point you made earlier, which is like sometimes people who are new to a team are more willing and open to give feedback. I had one person on my team who like a 100-day report of how things were going, and it was really useful. There's some really useful insights. So I think it really depends on kind of where the team and where you're at. At one point I did a thing where, at a lot of these companies like Facebook or Google and others, pulse kind of things that they do. It's like an annual or biannual a survey that they do across the company. And so we were growing very quickly, my team at Facebook Meta, and I felt like there were some things that were going well, some things that weren't. So I actually created like a mini monthly like pulse survey that I just sent out anonymously. I asked people to comment anonymously or not, and that was actually really useful. But it had a short life though, because we kind of moved through those issues. It didn't feel like we needed to keep doing that. Sometimes, it'll feel burdensome. I mean, we've all been in these situations where we're like keep getting asked to give feedback, and it gets like a bit much, and then it kind of annoys you. So you kind of calibrate it carefully. And sometimes when things are, in a more nascent or uncertain state, you may want more feedback, but you also may choose to ask for it differently, or may ask for it incidentally, so it doesn't seem like you're overly worried about stuff. There, again, this is like we said, tricky. But I think you're going to have to look at it as different times and places for different ways of gathering information about what's going well and what's not working. Yeah,
true. Thanks, Rob. And also, I did redeem myself. My best employee stayed and hired 2 other best employees.
Oh, great! That's great. I always love those stories where it's like, I think a lot of relationships are like that, where it starts out, it's kind of like tricky. But if people are committed to it and work through the issues on both sides, I think those can be some of the best relationships, work or otherwise, that we have.
Yeah, exactly. And she became my advocate within the company, helped me to facilitate conversation with other employees as well. That's great. Yeah, exactly. I think this is a true definition of leaders, understanding how to fix the problem, actually own your mistakes as well. And I bet you have gone through a lot of this when you run your startups and bigger companies as well. So Rob, let's ask more strategic question. And we talk about people like feedback and trust and organizing different teams. Now, as we all know, the tech industry has been interrupted by AI. We all know this. And so do you think, and also like Bing is the #1 most recent download search engine recently because ChatGPT, integration, different things. Do you think the future of Google is going to get impacted by the rise of ChatGPT and Bing, and it will eventually get replaced by them? What's your thought?
Yeah, look, I think everyone is going to have to, Google included, has to take, has to pay attention to this stuff. And I think, in many ways, Google is an AI first company and has been working on these things for a long time. So I'm sure they have a role to play, in this. I think you'll also see lots of new companies, OpenAI and others to enter this space and to figure out how to make this stuff work. I think there's also, if you've seen the ChatGPT plugins, I think there's also a role for other companies to play where they're bringing new integrations, ways to use information. I also think there's going to be a ton of just unknowns and things that go wrong and automation run amok kind of thing. I know you can use the ChatGPT plugin, for example, to queue up emails, and I actually saw a funny cartoon yesterday. I tweeted it yesterday where it was where someone was like, oh, I can just take this one bullet and turn it into a whole email thanks to AI, and the other person was, well, I can take this whole email and condense it to one bullet point so that I can pretend like I read it. So I think you're going to see some really interesting overlaps in how this stuff works and how people use it. But ultimately, I think these things are tools. They're going to have a lot of disruption in certain areas, certain parts of certain industries and certain parts of the business. I still think there's a lot of things where you will not be able to condense the answer down to a nice paragraph or two of text. You're going to have to search and iterate and go through and look at stuff and take multiple sources into account. So, I assume that these companies will figure out ways to create different experiences around these tools, whether that's a different new search experience or, different ways of interacting with other tools like email or other things.
Yeah, exactly. So do you think the trend of the industry in the AI space is going to be similar to the original booming of Web3? So all there's a foundation of Ethereum network and there's so many different kind of chains, people building on top of Ethereum. And now this downturn of the Web3 industry was because people realized that not all the protocols are very necessary. And do you think this will be similar trend to the AI space? Right now we're on the rise, people building different apps on top of AI. Do you think eventually we'll settle down using only one best model? Could be ChatGPT or different things. Oh, by the way, Google has its own BART. You have AI thing for BART. Do you think eventually we'll settle down on one best model that will just synchronize the whole world as a foundation, and then you build small things on top of that? Or there will be several BART, ChatGPT, and AI engine, different things running in parallel. So what's your prediction of the industry?
Yeah, I'm sure. I think there'll be a few. I don't think there's going to be thousands. There'll be lots of sub models and enhancements and plugins and things on all of these. But I do think that it's probably going to be a bunch of network effects and probably a small number of folks who run the underlying models. But I think it's hard to predict how this stuff is going to go. I've been playing around a lot, especially with ChatGPT, and it's really interesting, and it's gotten a lot better in the last few months, and so I'm sure we're going to see a ton of stuff happen here. I had a lot of experience, as I mentioned before, working as an API partner of some of these big companies, right? So if I put that lens on things, I think the hard thing here is figuring out how to build a successful scaled up business on top of someone else's models and technology. So I think you're going to have to look at things like, well, do we have unique training data that we have a version that builds on top of the stuff and this and whatever? That's going to be very rare, but I think there'll be those cases. I think there's going to be people who monetize stuff in a very special way. There's going to be people and companies who are able to bring things into real world applications that require bits and add together. So I think there's going to be like interesting stuff we can't even really conceive of yet. But I do think there is this question of, are you just an API partner of one of these models and one of these companies?
Yeah.
Are you actually creating durable value yourself? And frankly, like this is difficult. Like a lot of companies in the space I was in the kind of ads API business, they tried and were not able to build their own, long-term sustainable business on top of someone else's stuff. So I think it will be challenging.
It's very difficult to build long-term sustainability business on top of other people's stuff was because you're lacking the unique training data to create something unique. Am I right? That's the main trigger, not able to do it?
Right, that's one thing. So like in the ads example, I'll give you a specific example. So for my company, so we built this integration where we worked with Getty, where you could pull in stock images to use in your ads.
Yeah.
And you'd pay Getty like $1.50 or something for each one of these images. And so we did this integration. It was really great. Like we went to the Getty Images Partner Summit, all this other stuff. But then, Facebook we were an API partner of Facebook. And so we had this and you could essentially get this value. But then Facebook, where they were then offering these images to advertisers for free. So you could get stock images for free. So now it's like, okay, well, they're doing a better job of integrating it themselves and it's free and they have more scale. And so, API partners can do a lot of things and can innovate, but then often the things that they do that are successful, the company itself, who may have many more resources, like, oh, this is really interesting. We should bring this closer to our core feature set and it then becomes something that for a small company to differentiate on and own, because the underlying company can just replicate it and use it see them getting some success with it and then kind of redo it themselves. Now again, I don't think a lot of this is malicious, to be clear, but I do think that this is kind of the way innovation goes, which is like stuff that is initially kind of an add-on, often then over time becomes a core part of the platform.
Exactly.
Useful, and it can also then be even better once it's a core part of the platform. So my real question with a lot of these things is like, what's going to be core? What's going to be stuff that people can create value with? How can those companies realize the value? And so, there's tons of these AI companies. I think a lot of it is going to end up being a nothing because it's not going to work out. But I do think that it's a really exciting time to be working on this stuff and trying to figure those questions out.
Perfect. So Rob, one of the most asked questions today is that how can people become an AI product manager? So what's your advice to them? Because it's so hot right now. So what's your advice?
Yeah, that's a good question. Teams I've worked on have done a lot of AI stuff, kind of machine learning, computer vision related stuff, image recognition, so on. So I think, working on some of those kinds of basics and things that are like, in general, I like the unsexy side of sexy technology. So specific example, we were competing for, PhDs in ML and AI related disciplines when we were doing kind of image recognition for figuring out if, people are trying to put porn in ads. We were competing with people who wanted to build filters for Snapchat or Facebook or whatever, real-time computer vision applications. And so I think, again, like if you're thinking about some of that stuff, I'd say look at some of the things side or the fundamentals or the baseline, the basics, and learn those. That's always a good thing to that's one way to kind of get up to speed on something in a way that maybe might be less hard to get into than if you're trying to go work at the hottest new startup that's doing some of this stuff. Again, you should try that too. But the reality is, a lot of these fundamentals, I think, will stand people in good stead if they learn them and they understand them deeply.
Exactly. All come from the foundations and fundamentals. And then you can move on to either larger tech, smaller tech, and totally up to your career choice. Which leads into a very interesting, disruptive, I think nasty comment online by Andrew Chan. And he said something interesting, saying that for people select their career choices, as we know, so you have experience with startup all the way to very large, one of the most popular tech companies in the world. So Andrew Chan said something very interesting, and he was talking about, hey, for companies like Google, Meta, all the like big tech, like FAANG companies, and when they need employees, they bring employee into the new company. And then once the most talented employee join the company, they hope the dreams getting killed there because they're working on something not very passionate, and the interview is very difficult once you get into working on something small. And once there's a layoff, you're the first one to go. Your dream get killed. So therefore, he's totally anti-join big tech company. So what's your reaction to it? Do you agree, disagree, or is there any truth to it?
Well, I think it's both something that he's saying that's in his interests to say, right? As someone who works at a VC, prominent VC fund, that want people to join these other companies. And there is some truth to it because, you're going to have a slower pace of innovation. You're going to work, you may work on a project that gets killed. You may work on something that's not core to the business. There's definitely lots of things. And the trade-offs are you probably get paid better, at least more, at least in the short term. Now, if you work at a startup that turns out to be a 10,000x whatever it is, you're going to make more money. But the point is, and a lot of people, again, to be clear, aren't doing this for money. But look, I think there's always reality to, and you should always do your on the team, the company, the org. I think there's many more questions when you go to a big company. It's like, okay, well, how are these organizations going to change over time? What's the leadership like? And like, there's a high degree, I would say there's a high degree of between how good different organizations are at these big companies and how, and good maybe is too objective a term, how matched they are or going to be to your career aspirations and to, the things you want to learn. So for me, I think a lot of it's about what do I feel like I can learn stuff here. And then the reality is for anyone who's worked in startups, sometimes you just kind of need something a bit more stable. And again, with tech layoffs, maybe things aren't as stable, but you may need something where the dynamics of the trade-offs of, high risk reward variance is lower and, just stability is, because you can't just kind of be going on and on and on for years and years and years. I think I found when I was working in startups, it was taking a lot less money for many years. And again, we had a good exit my first startup, and it was good, but it's still, I probably would have made more money if I'd been a product manager at one of these other big companies, right? When you add it all up at the end of the day. So I think again, it's another one of these things that's a trade-off. I would just suggest people do the due diligence, talk to PMs, talk to other functions, talk to folks at these companies, do the research. Again, take the stuff you read online with a grain of salt. If other platforms, like some of that stuff is actually really interesting. Some of it's, a bit vitriolic. But again, do your diligence and talk to more people than you would otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I think the foundation for people is to really design the career path and with more information and continue to invest in themselves, learning different AI technology or any new technology or any new skill set so they can always be on top of the game in the market. So one last question to you, Rob, is that what's your opinion regarding investing, like growth mindset, investing in themselves? And I think it's kind of new concept. Lots of people think about investing in stock market or buying some Bitcoin, different things. What's your opinion regarding investing in themselves and having a growth mindset? Do you think it's a foundation, most important thing compared with investing in stock market and real estate? So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think that they don't have time for like networking and meeting other people outside of their core role. I'm like, you kind of need to do that. Like you need to find, your work or people that you trust that you can bounce things off of. I think you need to be taking courses. You need to be up leveling your skills. I think if we going back to your AI questions, like some of the parts, like if you're really great at writing emails and that's like your core superpower, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to develop some other skills. And again, I've worked with some of the best email writers, I think, on the planet. Some PMs are really great at communicating. I think that'll still be a valuable skill. However, like it can't be the only thing. I think there's like definitely this, folks get comfortable with the things that they're good at. I think you need to get out of your comfort zone and learn new skills, and you need to get out of your comfort zone. Also, we're talking to people that maybe, you wouldn't talk to otherwise and learn things from them as well. So I think it's really going to be key to have a growth mindset.
This is amazing, Rob. Thank you so much for sharing with us all like golden nugget and everything you just shared with us. So if the audience have follow-up questions, where would they find you?
Yeah, so my DMs are open on LinkedIn and on Twitter, so people can hit me up on either of those spots, and always happy to help make connections to other folks as well who can maybe be helpful. So yeah, feel free to hit me up on either of those platforms.
This is awesome. So we're going to link Rob's Twitter in the description of the show note. It's very popular. He's like posting amazing stuff on Twitter. So I'm very excited to have you join us, share with us today. And everyone make sure to follow Rob on Twitter and continue to like, subscribe, and comment on our show so that I can bring more amazing speakers on our Product Insider podcast. Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Rob, and thank you for everyone who joined us and submitting all your questions through the back end. That's amazing. Awesome. Thank you, guys. See you, Rob. And
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. Awesome.
Thank you.
Great. Cool. All right. So, music down. Okay. So now everybody who is with us live, whoever RSVP to ask Rob live Q&A, you should already receive a Zoom link from my team. Okay, so Rob and I are going to jump to the Zoom link right now, and feel free to submit your questions on the Zoom link as we're switching to a different platform. Okay, we're going to see you live and there. And for people who didn't get a Zoom link, if you don't know how to get a Zoom link, you should email my team. So my team basically send out emails regarding join our inner circle. There's a link for you to get a Zoom link. If you miss it this time, we'll make sure we'll send you the recordings and also invite you to our next Q&A with our next amazing speakers. This is awesome. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. So Rob, we can just drop and click the link, join the Zoom on the other side.